All right. Welcome, I'd say, to both Mom and Janie.
That's right.
Oh my gosh. Well, we are so excited to have you on our podcast, Janie. I mean, we have known each other for a few years, and just the way in which this has all come together is just wonderful and wild, and just so excited to have you share some of your experiences with Mom too on the last resort.
Yes, it is amazing that we've known each other for several years, and introducing me and recommending me to the show gave me the greatest gift, and that is your mom.
So sweet.
wild.
So sweet. You were a gift to me. Absolutely as well. Yeah.
It couldn't have been a better fit and a better person to lead this couples retreat with. So thank you, Sarah, for the gift that keeps on giving, because I have a friend for life in both of you, but especially Mom.
So good. Well, just wild, for our listeners, I taught yoga on one of Janie's retreats in Orlando years ago. And when everybody was just looking for a couples therapist, I was like, well, these are two of the best couples therapists I know in Orlando, Mom and Janie. It makes sense that you guys would befriend each other on the show. So
it's amazing how that works, because I didn't know Sarah, and you were recommended to me, and your name kept circulating in the community when I was looking for someone who could be sensitive enough to do yoga trauma-informed therapy for the women redeemed retreat, and your name kept coming up, and we look back, and it was all meant to happen.
Yes.
Well, before we get into the full of it, so there have been 4 episodes already dropped on The Last Resort, and I want you both to share a little bit about your backstory on how you got into the show and what it was like just arriving on this journey together, separately and then together.
You want to take that at the top, Janie?
Sure, absolutely. So I remember when the car arrived at my house, Sarah, that I was getting in that car and driving, being driven, I should say, about 6 hours down to our resort location. And I remember thinking in the car, I have no idea what I'm walking into with the couples, in the sense that, we did an assessment with them the way that we would with our clients. But outside of that, right, that was my first introduction to them. So I remember driving and being excited to be able to recall their goals and the things that they wanted to achieve in therapy, and to be able to help achieve them. Yeah. And I remember that first day, at some point, running into my new co-stars, my new co-therapists, and then the rest was history from that. We all connected, and we were really looking forward to working with our couples and providing great care, therapy, breakthrough, all the things they needed to be able to get closer and make some decisions about their relationship.
Yeah. Very similar to how I felt, Janie. Very similar, because I can remember the town car pulling up and the chauffeur, and so many people coming out of their condos here and going, what's going on? Is something happening? I'm like, oh my gosh, this is very unusual about getting in the car and going to the office. And then, yes, going through all my notes. I can remember going through all my notes from doing the intakes with the couples. I'm like, oh my gosh, I hope I can remember all of these people. I've not met them in person. I want to have some context, because we were coming to do healing for this retreat. That was our full purpose. And then the other thing I'm so grateful to you for is you are so awesome at social media. So I'm looking at your social media while I'm in the car. She's doing reels with the drivers, with the coming into the marathon key, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to do this. I need to do this. You were instrumental in me having so many backstory videos. So thank you for your expertise at that. But it was great. It was great. And then coming in and meeting you in person, it was just like, I felt like I had known you forever. And it was very interesting and a little intimidating, I have to say. Yeah. It was like we had really no idea of what was going to be presenting to us. Yeah.
Well, it's really interesting. I mean, you both are such experts in your field and work with couples all the time, but there is this other level of pressure about like a certain amount of time, a certain amount of sessions, and you're being filmed.
Yes.
So, you know, it's a different level. So what do you think? I mean, you both come, Mom, you're like spiritual soul coach, past life regression expert. Janie, you're the relationship trauma couples expert here. Do you think it was the fields, like the like-mindedness that brought you together, or was it more of like the situation of like, we're in this and there's all this like happening and that was what bonded you? What do you guys think it was?
I think all of that, right?
Yeah.
So I think we were in alignment, but yet we had enough differences in our styles that we knew that together we can really help the couples and they were complementary. But alignment is definitely there for sure.
Yes, because that is actually what we do every single day. We're taking trauma, we're releasing it through the different techniques that we both use, and we come from a very similar background of systems. I mean, we come from a very similar background. We use very similar wordings. When I would hear her do the counseling, I'm like, I'm always nodding, you know, and it was very much in alignment, and that felt very, very comfortable. So it was a good place to be with her for sure.
Absolutely.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So reality TV show, is that something you both watch already? Are you in that world? Well, you know, has this been something you've ever like been drawn to?
You know, this was my first experience with reality TV. Obviously, I'm aware of reality TV because that seems to be the go-to. But, you know, my passion is with working with the couples and the people that I serve. And I'm also a faculty member with an organization and then running retreats and doing all these other things. So watching reality show is something that's new to me with this show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would agree too. I had literally never watched a reality series. I had never, and especially to do with couples. So I take that back. I watched The Amazing Race. That was the only reality show I had ever watched because.
Oh, wait, Mom, no. What did we watch growing up?
What?
American Idol.
Oh, okay.
yes.
It is a reality show. Okay.
It
okay.
is, right? Survivor and
Any talent we always watch. That's right.
Yes, talent. But as far as relationships, I mean, well, you know, Sarah and Janie, what do we do all day long? We speak to couples and individuals about their relationships, their trauma. And the last thing I want to do is go home and watch drama. I mean, that is just so not my thing. So no, I had never watched any of this series. And, you know, I think, Janie, they did give us a suggestion. Maybe you want to watch some clips. And I can remember saying to Janie, I don't want to watch any. I don't want to be tainted by any past behaviors going in. I want this to be, they're all going to be receptive. They're all going to be, this is going to be a pure experience. I didn't want to have any prejudgment or thoughts, or I mean, not that I would anyway, but I mean, you just don't want to be tainted by anything.
Yeah, it's hard not to be influenced. It's kind of like if you're doing couples therapy, but you had only talked to one person.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Automatically there is a seed that's planted. And certainly reality TV shows show not all the sides. There's always one side. So it's hard to see the whole. So if you had watched it before, it might have influenced you. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the backstory of the first 4 episodes of this TV series and see if we can get some clarity to some of the information or misinformation that has been written about or shared on social media. And I think some of the most popular, the biggest stories, that have gone on was the 2-hour premiere, which you guys hosted like this private watch party, which I was so sad to miss because I was in Europe.
We're so sorry you weren't there.
Oh, no.
Well, you were in Europe.
I know. But some of the conversation that came out from watching that premiere was, why did the therapist let the couples drink before they came into their first group session?
Big question.
Yes.
Would you
That
like
is
to
a big
take it
question.
first, Janie?
Sure, that is a big question, and we completely, or I can say I completely understand why watching the show and watching the premiere that would stand out, right? So how we walked it out is that we had no awareness that even occurred before we actually met them. So in
Mm.
that first episode, when we are having the bonfire conversation, that is the first time we met them in person.
Oh,
We
at
had
all.
at all, right?
Yeah.
Besides our Zoom sessions. So we had no idea what was going on before we actually met them live and what we saw on television. And we were able to tell that there was some consumption of alcohol in that session real time as everyone was watching it with us. So we did discuss that and bring that to attention. And that no longer happened for us after we made that concern, I should say. So whenever we had our therapy sessions or anything going forward, that was not something that we experienced.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting that people thought we had this level of influence or control when it was the very first evening. And I think they told us, I mean, it wasn't even starting, I think, until 8 o'clock at night, because people had been arriving that day. So this was all an evening session. And, frankly, it didn't even occur to me that, they would be doing happy hour beforehand. I mean, it just didn't even occur to me, because I know Janie and I are both, qualified supervisors for interns in our own fields. And certainly we go over, that we don't want people under the influence when they're coming in for sessions with anything. And so that would have been the first thing. Had we thought that was happening, we kind of just thought they'd be coming from their rooms. People were arriving late and coming to this big bonfire. And then, of course, wow, yes, we were like, oh, okay, there's somebody's been at the bar drinking for a while. And afterwards we did, speak we're very clear that this could not happen going forward, because it's not pure therapy. It's not going to be productive. And I do think, Janie, don't you, that some of them, it was a little liquid courage, because they were nervous. They were very nervous, right?
But
yeah.
From the other side, they didn't know what to expect of us either, right?
Yes.
So
true.
not in any way saying that was okay what they did. We do understand that people get nervous their first time coming to a couples retreat or first time doing healing type of work, but under no circumstances is it effective to allow people to be under the influence when we are doing therapy sessions. I know, Sarah, I've had people in my practice show up under the influence, and we could not do therapy session, nor did I let them drive home. So that's just not how we practice, and that's not something that we would ever co-sign to, ever.
Well, it's a little, I think probably I have watched reality TV shows before, and I think there is a little bit different where in the culture of just a normal reality TV show, like that's more encouraged to loosen up, have fun, everybody's getting together, have your welcome drink. And this is the first time there's been a therapeutic component. So I think for everybody, it was probably like, oh yeah, wait, we're actually doing real therapy. We're here to save our relationship. So this is something totally different than probably anything they've been on before. How did they receive it once they were like, okay, yeah, this is not appropriate? Was that received well, or did you have some resistance?
Well, I can completely understand that from a normal retreat perspective. People would have welcome drinks and those types of things. Retreats that I do, no alcohol is allowed because they are therapeutic.
They're much more therapeutic,
Right. So that's the understanding. But I think what we understand is that the couples understood, right? In order to do real therapy and to really do the work that they were asking for, they have to have a sober mind. They have to have a clear mind. They have to be able to engage. And that's what we experienced going forward from that first session.
I felt that they were very respectful once they understood where we were coming from. Again, they did not know. I mean, most of them had never received therapy before, so they were like, "Oh my!" I mean, they were very uncomfortable. I mean, it was quite visual. They were so uncomfortable. But once they understood it, they totally agreed, and that was never an issue again in any other group or individual session. Yeah. They were
Well, and
very
that shows
respectful.
that shows a lot of respect to you both and understanding the process.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so some other articles, I'll just kind of be this moderator of what's been thrown out there, you know, what's fact or fiction. Why weren't the therapists harder on what the couples were saying in the first group session?
Yeah, we've been hearing that a lot, haven't we, Janie?
We have.
Which is interesting, like what's hard to mean, like what's the expectation, but what do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, so yeah, and some of them said, yeah, why did you tell, you know, Molly that she needed to sit next to him? That was the only thing that they thought was good because you were more directive there, Janie. And then I'm like, yeah, well, that would be normal, but why weren't we harder on them? I mean, as therapists, first time meeting, we know we have to establish a bond with these people. We have to understand and come from a very empathetic point of view and look and feel so they feel heard. If we start with them feeling like we're criticizing or judging, they're going to shut down for we had 2 weeks, 24/7 of being with these couples. We wanted to start out with a joining with them, not alienating them. And so I think that, you know, we certainly questioned things and we reflected on what they were saying, but coming down hard in a first session, I can't imagine any therapist doing that. Honestly.
Well, you lose trust, you lose rapport. I mean, you break the bond immediately.
Yeah.
And I totally agree, right? What we were trying to achieve is to create a safe space for them. And we know in order to influence our clients to move and be motivated to change is they have to trust us, and we have to be able to be a place where they feel heard, where they feel seen, where they felt understood. And that being our first meeting for them was our first touch base. So establishing that rapport, hearing why they were there for the retreat, and being a non-judgmental person in their life, regardless of how you know the viewers and the people that are watching, the things that they're struggling with, right? It's easy to judge, and I completely understand that. But from a therapeutic process, we wanted to be that holding space for them, to provide them a place where they can truly be seen and be heard and say what they needed to say, so that we also knew the goals that we would have to be established and working on with them through the retreat.
You know, and I have to add, because it just made me thought when you're saying that, Janie, I'm thinking maybe more people expected us to be like, for us to be more dramatic, for us to be like the couples on a reality. Maybe they had an expectation we were going to be those kind of therapists where we would be like in their face and like, you know, that's what just occurred to me. I'm like, because they had no idea what kind of therapists we are either. But this is the process we do every single day in our offices. Yeah.
Absolutely. We're licensed in the state of Florida. This is what we do. But I do think, to your point, Petey, that the Dr. Phil and these types of shows that in your face, tell it like it is, those are talk shows. He's not doing therapy. So I think it kind of creates this certain type of viewpoint.
What the expectation was.
Yeah.
Well, think about like when you're working with clients, when they come in, you know, as a therapist, we can kind of see what the major problem is. You can see the holes, and surely we could just go direct and say like this, fix this, and you're perfect. But it never works. Like if the idea doesn't come from within the couple, then it's never going to take root and then grow. So it's so counterproductive to the therapeutic process. And I think you're right. The expectation for a reality show to have this like pizzazz as a therapist and be like very, you know, big and dramatic and directive maybe was the expectations versus what is real therapy. What does that actually look like? I think that's what you two were able to really demonstrate.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, more questions. There was a few, like, we'll say just like dramatic things that were shared in the show. And are these problems made up? Is it scripted? Did you know about some of the like bomb drops? And there was like, gasping.
They are none of this was scripted, right? So was real time for us. What you saw us saying was real time. No one scripted anything that we had to say. However, when people are watching the show, you have to understand it's also edited, right? So if I'm doing a 3-hour session with Angela, there could have been just a 2-minute or 3-minute clip that you're seeing, right? So I can understand why somebody may think it's scripted, but no, it's absolutely not scripted, but it is edited.
Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah.
Yes. Because I was asked that question all the time. Oh, did the couples see the script? Did they know which problem they were supposed to be talking about? I'm like, no, we had no idea. Obviously, I mean, I think I'm sure on our faces they could tell at times we had no idea. And I know at times I was sitting there in that first circle hearing some of the revelations that were coming out and literally internally thinking, saying, wow, how am I going to reframe this one? Wow, how am I going to respond to this therapeutically? Because it was rather explosive at times. Yeah, no script. No script.
What about, the infamous hall pass situation when that was brought up? Was that something that, what can you speak to that? Because, was that real? Was that something you've heard about in the practice? And what do you think? Is that something you coach people on doing? Maybe you explain the hall pass first before we go into it.
Go ahead, Petey, take it away.
Well, Swilla gave Kalani a hall pass. And what that meant was she could go outside of the marital relationship and experiment with another man. But he said it was kept to kissing, right? So it was supposed to be, and this is because he had gone outside of the marriage in the past, and she was very upset about it all. And he was trying to make it even. He was trying to make it right. I mean, in his mind, he felt the hall pass to her would make it right, which does show you the level that he was coming from to think that that would make it right. Have I seen the hall pass? I have heard it in a couple of others with doing couple relationships where it was brought up as an option. But again, they were in counseling with me. What do you think of the hall pass? Is this a viable, option? No, this never, ever, never works. And so it was not acted upon. But of course, yes, heard of and done that. So we, again, no idea that this was on the table when they came into the group. None. For you too, Janie?
And I agree with Petey in the sense that it would not be something that we would therapeutically recommend, or it's something that we have or I've not seen work well for couples. They're usually coming into couples therapy after the fact because it hasn't worked well. So I think there's a better opportunity that when a betrayal occurs in a relationship, that they work on the betrayal, recovering from the betrayal, and then making their relationship better, the two different buckets, versus I did this, now you have an opportunity to do this. It further erodes the relationship and it can create more distrust. And as we've seen,
which I think the show, I think that was what we saw on there.
Absolutely. And as we saw on the show, Sarah, is that Kalani had only been with the Swello. So then doing that also created a different, what we call arousal template in therapy, right? So she was only had a certain level of arousal because she's only been with her husband, but then opening that gate to other experiences, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. So I normally warn couples that when they do things that are outside of their relationship, you can't take that back, so to speak.
And especially so hard when you're not in a healthy space in the relationship.
Right. When there's all the underlying resentments and anger, and then you introduce this with a third person. Oh, yeah.
I can get the intention of here's maybe it'll make it even, but it just doesn't work that way. No, there's no clean slate on that.
Yeah.
And that was another jaw dropper, I think. I mean, which is interesting to think it is a very vulnerable and courageous space and brave space for these couples to enter into publicly doing therapy when they're on this last resort. What do why do you think they did this and didn't go a different route?
And you are absolutely right. It takes a brave couple and a brave person to come on national television and put all of their business out there. And not only just put their business out there, but then once you do that, you're also open to a lot of criticism, opinions, all the things from being on a television show. But I think a lot of the couples did this because it truly is a last resort for their relationship. They wanted the help.
Mhm.
We are professional, licensed, degreed, many years of experience therapy, and many of them, as Petey said earlier, did not have either access or experience. So doing this and then doing it in front of a lot of people, I believe people also wanted to provide other people hope and potential healing from watching.
Yeah, I totally agree with Janie that, these couples wanted help. They were very clear about that. They, as scary as they felt at the beginning, I mean, they were wanting more and more and more sessions with us. As each day progressed and they got to know each of us, they asked for so many additional sessions. We did so many that were never on camera because we wanted to help. We wanted, that's our mission in life. And the other part of it is they are so courageous. I mean, to come on and expose everything in their lives and be so honest. And I think I said this to you, Sarah, when I came back. I said, imagine, a lot of our clients that we work with every day. Let's just put them up on a big screen, put their lives up there, and everything that they talk about in session, it would look very dramatic, just the same. So, and then you have all these cameras following them everywhere with everything they're doing, in their bedroom, in their, it's very dramatic. So I think if you took any couple, it's going to look dramatic, which is reality TV. That is the reality TV. Yeah.
Do you feel like there was a point where sometimes you like the cameras went away to you, like you didn't feel that energy as much and it felt like you're just in the session doing work and some of that got forgotten?
Well, I think we are aware that the cameras were there, but we were doing what comes natural to us, and we were doing what we do every day.
Because you kind of get in the flow of it, right? Like
you do get into the flow of it. And, like Petey said, a lot of the times we also did just as much off camera with the couples. So knowing that truly, and it's hard, I understand it's hard for people to see that through an edited television show, but they truly did want therapy and healing and to take this opportunity. So there are those moments where you can kind of melt the cameras and all the things in the background because you are in the flow with them, for sure.
Yeah. And it's a great question, Sarah, because I went there feeling like, what is it going to be like to do a session with, 3 cameras in a room at times? When I did, a past life regression, there were 4 cameras in the room. For me, it was unbelievable that they completely melted away. I was so focused on the process of hypnosis and what I was doing that it just melted away. And when I did group sessions, and again, so many cameras we had in the rooms, every angle, every sound, and it melted away because it was just like you were in your office and you were just so focused on what they were speaking and trying to bring up the therapeutic techniques that would be best for that couple. It was amazing to me. I think probably, Janie, it was when we did the group sessions, it felt more like the cameras were right there because each of us were taking different turns. So you would kind of get out of that singular focus,
Absolutely.
So you brought up these group sessions, and there was the first one, the fireside, but then there was, and I think in the second episode, there was a group session where you guys were dealing with trust. And in that, it seemed that Big Ed was caught for cheating in the exercise. And, down later in the show there, he does admit that. But it's felt like, and we felt like read about that the therapist again didn't kind of come down on this hard enough, didn't address it. And I'm curious to hear, like, what were the other conversations around this? I know you guys had a lot of other sessions and a lot of other conversations that weren't aired. So I'm wondering, like, what was happening? What were the conversations that happened?
Sure. Go ahead, Petey. Take it away, and I'll make my comments.
Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, the interesting part is that he did say that he cheated before we sat down for the group session after the exercise to really process it with the couples. So he did admit to it. It wasn't like he had to be, put on the money and come on in, he did. He came right out, while we were still all standing around and saying, yep, you're right. I did it, and then it was like, why? Well, why? I like attention. And so then it gave us an opportunity. Because I think the processing, wasn't it, Janie, like an hour and a half after, the actual, because we were there till later in the night again, processing with each couple what was going on with their trust issues and how that would, here it was, the emotional, the physical trust, the mental, and what that looked like. And he could arrive and understand and speak to why he did it. He really did have this moment. And so why would we come down on him then and crucify him even more? It was like he was able, through the processing that all of us did, get to arrive at the moment where he took the responsibility and understand and be able to communicate why he did it that way. Is that how you remember it, Janie?
Yeah, and I understand, Sarah, why people looking on the outside would criticize that, but it was actually a good thing that he cheated. And this is why, right? Because the game was about communication and trust and how they were communicating and trusting each other to get to the finish line. So for him to reveal that about himself, we were able to see what he needed to work on.
Yeah,
right?
like a therapeutic moment, honestly.
It was
to
a
like
very
have this
therapeutic moment.
Yeah.
So for us to get into rules and regulation and coming down on him would be ineffective to what we were trying to actually achieve. So it was a good thing that we saw that he was cheating, and that later on, obviously, he was able to admit to that we saw in the processing group. And also it validated his partner's experience with him.
Yes.
So we were able to work with them as a couple because we were there as therapists and saw that real time. So we had all these issues that we can address: his cheating, his dismissing of her, all the things that we saw and that everyone is criticizing about. We understand that, but we needed those things to come out in order for us to really work with them effectively, and not from a perceived, let's follow the rules, but this is who they really are. So how can we help them from what we've experienced firsthand?
Yeah, and it felt like a good healing moment with Ed and Liz, where he admitted it and shared, and then she thanked him, and that felt like a really good. We always talk about like when there's ruptures, you have to have the repair, and so ruptures aren't bad, right? It deepens the bond, and so it was nice to see like there was this little repair between the two of them.
Absolutely.
There was another rupture, I think, on the same episode that dealt with trust that had. I was shocked. I was like, did you know about this, Mom? When Yara confessed a secret in the group for the first time to Jovi. And, I'm guessing now from learning nothing was scripted, nothing was staged. Everybody was like figuring out else in real time, but she shared a really big secret, if you want to share what it was, on air, in the group setting. And I'm wondering, why reveal it in this way when there's so many other opportunities to let them know in one-on-one sessions or beforehand? What was going on there?
Well, I think you have to remember there were no one-on-one sessions up till then. So those were the first two group sessions we did. We had not had any one-to-one up to that point.
I see.
So Yara was so looking forward for an opportunity to feel safe in a group setting to speak of, and we can speak of because the episode has aired, being on birth control. I mean, I remember internally when she said, I have a secret to share. And I thought, oh no, I hope she hasn't had an affair,
Well, given what was already shown, right?
Because so many people also said that's what they were so thinking
Yeah.
she was on birth control, and she just didn't feel that she had a safe enough environment, or it would be discussed in a healthy enough way. And so she did bring it up in the group setting, which was very upsetting to Joby, because, why wouldn't you speak about this to me, but there are some strengths of sharing in the group setting. She felt support from a lot of the other women. I think there was almost a bonding moment that took place for her, and it was, yes, that's her body, these are her choices. And so there was a lot of bonding that happened with the women, and some of the men, said to Joby, yeah, that should have been done individually. So there was support kind of on both sides, but what it ended up doing, wasn't that Janie, when it kind of gave permission to Angela? Like, she said, oh my gosh, I can maybe speak about, some things that are really true here for me with Michael. Wasn't that, it kind of gave her permission then, because of this being in a group setting? Is that how you remember it?
Yeah, and I think that's the power of group therapy, is that there is that support, and it actually is what we call shame reduction. So when people are sharing in a group, it also, if they have any secrets or things that may not want to share, it reduces the shame that's inside of them, because if Yara can admit to something, then maybe I can admit to something. And to me, those are healing moments and those opportunities, because a lot of times people don't realize, even as we're watching these couples, it may be in different forms, but a lot of people can relate with one or other, even the challenge that they're coming to. It's a lot more relatable when people, and we are as sick as our secrets. So it also gets us well when not only we hear other people sharing things that are vulnerable, but it allows us to do so, as Petey's speaking about with Angela, because if you are sharing things, well, maybe, you know what, it's time for me to be honest and just get it out. So he almost has momentum for other people that are
Yeah.
involved in that process.
Well, yeah, and it normalizes, and all the empathy that surrounds it just helps to eliminate the shame, and you watch that just like ease as everybody was like, oh, I get it, and for both of them, they both got empathy for both sides. So you could see there was some healing, even though it was the shock and secret reveal, the therapeutic elements of it was really healing, and being able to reduce that shame, as you talked about, of just like, okay, now I can share it. And I think in the group, it allows like people to keep a little bit check on themselves, so they show up in a better way versus like reaction. There's more response than just this intuitive, like high tempo reaction. There's more of a, okay, let me like pause, because there's now this group versus one-on-one.
Yeah, it was much more measured. That's a good point. Yeah. And we have to remember, the majority of these couples had never met each other in person either. They just had known of each other, had seen each other in other reality, shows by themselves. But this was a first to be all together on this, 2-week venture on this island with 3 therapists, which was a little intimidating to them, on so many levels, because it was like, okay, this is the place to get honest. You could almost see inside everyone, it was, it was a lot. It was definitely a lot. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about Angela and Michael, because that's a really unique couple that is on the show, in that Angela's in person, and you see Michael kind of going around on his iPad. What is that dynamic like? Because I can't say I've ever done a couple session where that's been, one in person, and for long term, for this intensive like couple session. How has that been?
Well, it was unfortunate that Michael could not join us in person because of visa and all the challenges with coming in person. So the next best thing, because I do believe Angela needed to be at the resort, and she needed to be there. So the next best thing to do couples therapy was to involve him, just as we are using technology now, right? To use technology in a way that can create the next best experience for them to work on their relationship. And I do believe that you don't necessarily necessarily have to be physically in the same room to work on the issues, to communicate, to dive in. Sometimes it also creates, Sarah, safety, because the person is not in the same room with you. So you get
That's
a little bit
true.
more, get a little more courage
Good
to
point.
speak up for
That's
yourself.
true. Yeah.
And I believe, when we continue to move forward, we may see some of those types of things, right? More vulnerability in their couples therapy sessions.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, because I really didn't think it was a whole lot different, because we do virtual with couples, like I do one and she lives in Oregon and he lives in Orlando. And, they're together on my screen and, and we're doing the couple session. So really, it's not that different from that. And I think, yes, Janie, what you're saying, for sure, it gave Michael a little more ease to say things that he wanted to say. And God love him. I mean, he would be up in the middle of, it would be his middle of the night when it was our
Oh, the time zone
sessions.
difference. Sure,
He
yeah.
got up in the middle of the night. Like, how often? I mean, he was there every single time for every session. So God love him. I mean, he was committed to this process.
Committed, yeah.
And he really, and she was very happy that he was so committed. I mean, that showed a lot. And I mean, honestly, I have to say it wasn't easy for her to be there alone when everybody else is a couple and going to their rooms together. So, both of that. It was unique though, Sarah, with carrying Michael around on the iPad everywhere throughout the, at the pool and here. And like, it was very,
But he was there.
Experience. But he was there. He was
But you're
there.
right. It's probably a different dynamic not to have your partner there to decompress, especially with all of the drama that was going on. And I know with Angela, there was some more drama that had happened, especially with in episode 3. We saw that she really lost it in Liz's face, just screaming. And once again, there was some kickback and some coverage of that on the therapist, and not really addressing it or coming down harder on her the next morning. What did you guys feel on the inside?
Well, Sarah, we could just say it. There's a lot of kickback to that, right? So, and I understand it, right? When people are watching the edited show, I was watching, and Petey was watching their interaction along with everyone else that was watching it, right? We were not physically there when that occurred, but we were given information, and depending on who's giving you the information, there could be things that are minimized, or, Angela was Angela, these types of things. And with not having any previous experience with her and not knowing what those phases mean, right, you're not going to necessarily address it the way that if you were there, right?
Yeah.
Because her behavior was abusive. Let's call it out what it is. It was abusive behavior towards Liz. And there is no way, and I would ever co-sign with someone being triggered to be able to react on that and be abusive to other people, right? So when I met with Angela for multiple hours, I was working with the information I had. And also that was my first time having a therapeutic session with Angela. So, it's important to say, in order for me to have any influence on her behavior or to have any influence on her healing, she has to be in a place where, again, from a therapeutic process, I'm not a drill sergeant, that would be different, right? But from a therapeutic process, to give her space to be seen, heard, and understood, and to allow her to be able to give me the information I need. Because in order for us to truly help our clients, we need to understand their thought process, their belief systems, their, the things that they qualify their behaviors. In order for us to influence them and do therapy, we have to have all of that information. So, but I do 100% believe that just because someone is triggered, it does not give you the license to be abusive. It does not give you the license to get in someone's personal space. That was absolutely abusive, wrong behavior. So let me be very clear about that as Angela's therapist.
That is very clear. That is very clear, Janie. Very, very clear. And I agree with you. It was so difficult because we were only with the couples when we were in group or individual sessions.
No outside time.
We never hung out with them. We never saw them outside of the sessions. So all of these things that would happen, because of course, each couple has their own crew, their camera crew that follows them around everywhere. So we never were privy to any. We would hear, as Janie said, the next day, like she said, oh yes, Angela is Angela, was upset with Liz. Well, that's very different than the abusive incident that happened. And, I think Janie and I have talked, if we were to have done this again, to have requested, could I see actual footage from the evening before? That would have given us crucial information to do the sessions differently on so many levels at so many times. But that wasn't available. I don't know if that could have been available, but that would, it's very hard to do the counseling with someone when you have not a real reality of exactly what took place. Because I know when Janie and I both watched the episode, we were texting each other, oh my gosh. I mean, we were just like shocked because it was not relayed to us that way. So, they all know them, for working with them for 5 years. So Angela being Angela, that is typical Angela behavior for the last 5 seasons, from what I understand. So, but we had no knowledge of this. We just had no knowledge of that. So yeah, to do that differently next time.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't think I would have realized that there was no interaction between the therapist and any of the couples outside. Like, I would have thought because you're all on the same property, there was a little more overlap, so you'd be in the know more. But it sounds like you two were not privy to a lot of the information.
They specifically asked us not to have any interaction. So they would eat at a different place than we would eat. We would have, when I say 0 interactions, Janie and I never had any interactions with any of the couples outside of therapy. Yeah.
And it's important for us to also educate the listener, Sarah, is us being professionals, that would be considered a dual relationship, right? So outside of working with them, you can't hang out with your clients, you can't be at their house, you can't be kicking back with, those types of things. And we kept our professional standards, even being told to keep things separate. We had professional standards that we were walking through.
Yeah.
I know we're getting close on time, but I want to bring up the last episode on episode 4, when it was the sex talk. And how was that for you guys? And do you feel like the couples are ready to engage in that kind of conversation? Because from the outside view, it looked like they were a little bit disengaged from the process. And I'm curious about what you guys thought about that from your therapeutic lens.
Yes, I think that was the perfect word. They were very disengaged from the process. To be having these talks on sex and intimacy. Here you have Asuelo and Kalani not having sex, none. They're not even touching. And then you have, Molly and Kelly, they also were very clear. They were not in any type of a physical relationship, no sexual. So it was, and then Ed and Liz, they're coming from this huge blow up from the night before with all of these, issues just churning and churning. Now we saw, on the TV episode, her like throwing on clothes. Come on, let's go. It's like, they didn't want to be there. They were completely disengaged. They needed processing, right? They all needed, Angela got a little bit of processing, but she wasn't even there because she wasn't there, with Michael. And so, yes, they had not processed anything that had been happening. So not even having a sexual relationship for 2 of the couples, let alone it wasn't hard to see why they were disengaged. They really, it was not a space for them to want to be there. Now, had we been able to do some more communication like we did, post that, that's where we started having a lot more one-on-ones and teaching communication techniques. And had they had some of that, they would have possibly been more engaged with the process. But Yeah, pretty hard for Reba to get the responses I think she was looking for. Don't you think, Janie?
Yeah, and and we're working with couples and they're disconnected. They have situations that are unresolved. They're in the middle of a big fight. The last thing most couples want to talk about is having sex with each other. I mean, let's be real about it, right?
Totally. Yeah.
Because it's a vulnerable space. So it's important that when people are watching this and they relate to that, that it's normal. It's normal to not feel most attracted and that you want to jump your partner's bones when the two of you have these outstanding unresolved issues. So that's exactly how it came across, because that's exactly what was going on.
And makes sense. You really don't want somebody to shut down one side of them in order to show up sexually. Like that's an abandonment of self. And that's also not what you want, where you want them to show up authentically. So it's almost even better that that's what was happening, right? The disengagement for them honoring themselves, that was true to them because they hadn't gotten through the next steps. Well, I want to ask you both, what is it that you want people to keep in mind as they are watching these shows and as they're reading these articles and they are experiencing the show? What do you want them to remember? Because I know as therapists and very ethical and responsible ones, I know not everything is being shown in the sessions. And I'm sure it can be frustrating a little bit at times because you're not getting all of it aired. But also there are some good nuggets in there. And we as a whole appreciate hearing those. And I'm very excited to see more of the individual. But what do you want people to remember as they watch this?
I think for me, I want people to remember, and this was actually told to us on the set, but it was hard to comprehend at the time, never having been in a TV show before. And they told us for every 4 or 5 hours of filming, there's going to be 7 or 8 minutes of film. And that was, I mean, I heard it, but it was very hard to comprehend. And so just like with Janie talking, to Angela, for those 6 or 7 minutes on film, when I knew she had had a 3-hour session with her and had done so much more counseling, and to not see that and the result of it was very frustrating. And just like, I mean, I'm sure when I do the past life regression, those 3 hours with each one, it's going to show
probably like 3 minutes.
I mean, so that part, if I wanted anybody to remember that the most, that there was so much more behind the scenes, that so much more. I mean, the behind the scenes, so much more counseling that we did off camera, let alone on camera, where we really got to some deep levels with the couples, and they were so grateful. They were so honored that we took our time. I mean, I can't tell you how much they thanked me. They just thanked me so much for taking the time with them. So that's what I want people to take away and remember, is that it was a really great experience, and everything that you're seeing on the episodes is a tiny snippet of what happened. What about you, Janie?
Yeah, I would have to co-sign. So for one, it was a phenomenal experience, and it was an honor to be able to work with these couples through this process. But we were in a process, right? So as therapists, we do go through a process. So what people are seeing is the tip of the iceberg, right? There's so much more to an iceberg, but we also understand that it's a show and it has to be edited. But we were in a process. Is the first thing I want people to think about, that for everything they see, there's so much more that they're not seeing when they think of a tip of the iceberg. And then secondly is that just because someone, I think people can relate to this, especially if they're going to therapy or doing things in their private lives, is one group session or one therapy session, you're not going to just wake up and become a changed person. The couples are also going through a process. So when they have aha moments, it's like healing is like a zigzag. And this applies to everybody, including the couples that we're seeing on television, is that one moment it seems like they're really moving forward, the path forward, 2 steps back, right? Up and down. Healing is a zigzag. So when people are watching this, they also want to think about their own life, that as they're working through stuff, to not be hard on themselves and to give themselves the grace. It's healing is not linear for none of us. It's not reality. So the reality is what we're seeing is for every step forward, there could be 2 steps back. But the goal is that they do have a path forward. That's what I would want them to know.
Yeah. And I like that. I love, sharing that with a lot of my clients about grace. And like, Mom, you talk about a lot about like the unconditional love of self as a soul lesson. And that's something, if you are watching, if you are listening, and if you are able to give you guys and the couples grace and love, then you are able to do that for yourself and your own relationship. So maybe that's also like dual healing. Give it to you, and they're also giving it to yourself and your relationships in it. So that makes a lot of sense.
What a good interviewer you are, Sarah.
Oh, fantastic guest today,
It's
Absolutely.
Yes, it's great to be able to talk about really the backstory. And I think, we're absolutely going to have Dr. Janie back on, towards the end. So we can talk about more backstory, because we don't want to give anything away. But for the first 4 sessions, this really was the backstory from 2 of the therapists on the set. So it's really great. I'm so glad we were able to do this. Thank you, Janie. You're such an awesome guest.
Well, thank you, Petey and Sarah. Absolutely love your podcast. And I co-sign to your mom, not just because she's your mom, but you're it's just great being able to have this conversation with you, Sarah.
Yeah. Well, thank you both. As always, Mom, you're forever on this podcast, so you're not going anywhere. We'll see you again, Janie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.